Shabbat Shalom, I'm Robert Barr, and
I'm Iah Pilsbury.
And we are delighted that you're joining us here for this Shabbat service at ourjewishcommunity.org. We're going to begin with a reading and then talk a little bit about ourjewishcommunity.org and some exciting new developments here at our community.
Put away the pencil and the paper. Put away the notebook and keys. Set aside the shovel and hammer. Rest. For this interval, no buying, no selling, no working, no laboring, no straining, not living in the past, not planning for the future.
This is a time for celebration, for joy, for mirth. We are here alive to rejoice in another Sabbath, another opportunity to be together. Grateful for our family and friends. With no distractions, we touch and are touched, the great gift of the Sabbath. As I said, I'm Robert Barr, and this is Iah Pilsbury, and we are here at ourjewishcommunity.org and at Congregation Beth Adam, which is in Loveland, Ohio. I've been the rabbi here for a couple of years. Iah's been a Rabbinic Intern here for a couple of months, and we've been working together, and we are having a wonderful time. Hopefully you've joined us as well for the high holidays, and you got to meet Iah there, and join us, I guess, during the summer. Iah shared services with me. We are very excited at ourjewishcommunity.org. We have a bold, distinctive voice, one that incorporates modernity and science and a new understanding of what it means to be Jewish, along with a technology that allows us to reach people and create community around the world. It's always very exciting to balance these two things, to use new technology to meet new people. It's been great. I've gotten wonderful emails and responses from folks, and to be able to create something special and unique and genuine, as well as talking about what it means to be a Jew in the 21st century. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the technology changes, because some of you who've joined us in the past know that the last Friday night was a little bit different than previous Friday nights. It has to do with our streaming provider, Livestream, which has been very supportive of us since we began 8 years ago. We changed to their newer platform, which gives it a different look, but it also allows for a lot more functionality. It lets you quickly find us on your tablet or your mobile device, your handheld device, which we were having problems with before. That really was what prompted the move. A couple folks said, but gee, the chat seems to be a little bit different now in this new format than it was in the old format. It is a little bit different, but it actually allows for more conversations. Our old format, you could chat while we were live, but as soon as the service ended, all those conversations, all those comments disappeared. Now, your conversation, the chat that takes place from 6 to 6:30 when we're streaming our services live, you can see them interact with each other. And when the service concludes at 6:30, the chat moves from the side of the screen to the bottom of the screen and becomes an ongoing commentary thread. You can actually continue to talk to each other in real time. If the service ends at 6:30, you can keep on chatting and you'll see your comments come back and forth. But more than that, those comments stay on our site, which means in tomorrow or the next day or 2 days, if you have a new thought about what we said here, you can come back, add it, somebody else can respond. So there's an ongoing dialogue. And that to me is very exciting because, as you know, oftentimes I have a computer next to me, sometimes I don't. When we have two people, it's a little bit more complicated lately. I don't get to interact with the comments. Now we're going to be able to interact with them. If you have thoughts, feedback, share them with us. We're going to keep on doing this new format. It's what we're structured to do, and we're going to learn a little bit more. So your feedback, which people sent me already, has been very helpful. And as we're learning to use it and maximize it and to have a great experience, to be able to do services together, grow together, and learn together, because that really is what our Jewish community.org is all about. It's meeting people where we are, how we live our lives today. So it means whether you're watching live or you're going to watch it archives, you can be part of an ongoing conversation and be part of this incredible community. So we're going to continue with the candle lighting.
On this Shabbat, we create our moment in time. We pause to reflect upon our yesterdays and tomorrows, to renew our ties with families and friends, to restore our energies, to refresh our spirits. As the sun descends and shadows lengthen, the distractions of the day give way to the stillness of night. It is time now for us to see not with our eyes, but with our hearts and our minds. As the day gives way to evening, it's time for us to welcome Shabbat.
The candles stand before us, waiting to be lit. We recall our ancestors as we too seek to dispel the darkness, banish the cold, to bring glowing softness, warmth, and safety into our homes. May the dancing flames of these candles can kindle warmth within our hearts, wisdom in our minds, passion in our souls. Baruch ha'or ba'olam, blessed is the light within the world. Baruch ha'or ba'adam, blessed is the light within each person. Baruch ha'or ba'Shabbat, blessed is the light of the Sabbath. So we're going to continue with a conversation. You can chat in as well. We don't have a computer next to us at this point, so you can chat amongst yourselves. We'll get a chance to read them afterwards. But I wanted to talk to Iah tonight about an experience that she had reading liturgy at the congregation and how it reflects how different people in different schools of thought approach liturgy. So let me just sort of blow this up a little bit so it makes a little bit more sense. One of the things that we do, that all rabbis do, is read services. We just, right?
Yeah.
And we practice.
Totally.
And
Hebrew, English, it doesn't matter the language. You always have to practice first.
You have to always practice first. And what's interesting, when I trained at Hebrew Union College, that was the case. When I came here, I started practicing. And what becomes interesting is the feedback that you get from those who are teaching. Not just, oh, you stumbled or you read too fast or you're too quiet, was what's the job of the reader? And I think what's interesting is when we began to explore this, when I was working, we were practicing for the high holidays, it really was reflective, too, of how people approach the text and what the value of the text is and how we understand the words of our ancestors versus our words. So let me just give it a little bit more context. So I was going to practice, and some of you may have heard some of the stories about my brother 2 years ago. I spoke about him at the high holidays. He had a terrible stroke, and it really impacted him. What some of you may not know, or I don't know if I've talked about, my brother was a theater professor, a director, and an actor. In fact, he's now performing a one-man show called A Piece of My Mind. You can actually go, I'll give a plug for my brother right now, apieceofmymind.net, and go look at his website. There's actually a documentary about him and his recovery. And while he's no longer teaching full-time anymore, he still serves as a consultant here to work with us. And one of the things we talked about was having Iah read, and he was watching. He lives out in California. And we began to have a conversation about reading a service. And he gave you a lot of the very similar comments he gave me 30 plus years ago. So what kinds of things did you hear, and what were you processing as you were going through this?
So first of all, this was my first time leading or learning a whole new liturgy.
Oh, right, sure.
So Beth Adam has a unique liturgy that was created in our Jewish community that was created by members, which is pretty amazing in and of itself. And Jewishly, historically, of course, liturgy has to come from somewhere. So it was created by members. Just most of the liturgy that I had been used to leading before was not written by people I knew or had met. And I definitely was not supposed to read it like I knew who the authors were. And for me, that was the biggest difference.
Well, you also were reading, so more than you didn't know the authors were, you were reading historic text. You were reading sort of the traditional prayer book.
So the Reform prayer book, there are lots of different kinds of Reform prayer books. There are lots of different kinds of every kind of Judaism. But the ones that I was the most used to leading from were both English, which tends to be more modern, and the historic Hebrew text. But even if it was English or Hebrew, the way you read it is a bit the same. And so there was a certain sound like a rabbi. You want to have gravitas. So in fact, the first time we practiced reading with your brother, the very first thing out of his mouth was, "You sound too much like a rabbi."
And which was
the opposite in general, that you want to sound more and more like a rabbi.
Right. And I think because because as we were talking about it, we tried to figure out what did we learn? Why did seminaries teach people to read? And a lot of clergy have a very similar voice and as they read services. And I think what we were coming to was the idea is that the words are really important in that they represent tradition.
I mean, it really comes down to who do you want front and center? Do you want the page with the text standing between me and you? Or do you want me with the embodying, trying to move through the text at the same time? And so I had found that I was trained to hold up the text as my authority. This is what matters. Who am I to say anything? But you came here for these other words that are separate from me.
Right. Let's stick with that authority, because I think that's really what it's about in many ways, that it was all about authority, and the authority wasn't your authority, and it wasn't human authority even. The text embodied divine authority.
Definitely. And the rabbis are the heir to that divine authority. And in fact, there are two kinds of Torah in traditional Judaism: oral Torah, which was written by rabbis, and the written Torah, which is the scroll that we see in synagogues. So it makes sense that the rabbis would want to hold up their own words as more important than necessarily the individuals themselves.
And the idea is that by stepping back as the reader, you actually gain more authority because you're being infused with the authority of the text.
Yeah.
And the text is authoritative because even though the rabbis crafted it, it was supposed to be the will of God.
Yes.
And so even in liberal seminaries, and I think this cuts across, friends of mine who are in the Christian movements as well tend to do the same thing. It really was that these ancient texts, this historic text, is where it's at.
Yeah.
And here at ourjewishcommunity.org and Congregation Beth Adam, it's not just the liturgy is different, the underlying authority structure is different.
And the thing that was the most surprising to me is, while I was helping to lead services here at Beth Adam and ourjewishcommunity.org, when you looking up and seeing the community, the way people react to the liturgy was very different than what I was used to. So in other Reform contexts, when I've led services and people seem like they're really into it, obviously you never really know, because I'm not inside anyone else's head. But the air...
Oh, good.
Good, right?
That's a good thing,
the room,
very noisy.
So the room changes a little bit, and people tend... Not always, but they tend to close their eyes and move inward and have this blissed out, just on their face, or they look really sad, but it's always eyes closed, head down, it's inward. At Congregation Beth Adam, people were like this. And it was so interesting to see the difference, and both ways are valid in terms we need time to spend with ourselves, and we also need to be brought towards one another. But it felt so radically different. And it was really exciting and really powerful to see how that can change just the act of reading and choosing where we want to place ourselves.
Right. And part of it, I think, is the authority shifted.
Definitely.
The authority shifted from tradition or the past or God, depending on how you to people, to us as a community.
And they were
not just the authors of it, but all of us have created this together as human beings.
And by sitting in services and getting excited, they were giving the text their own individual authority and giving me the authority to read it with more of theirs. And it was this really interesting cyclical relationship that I just hadn't been aware of before.
Right. Because I think that's what makes this institution unique is this whole understanding of how we give expression to who we are and where we're going and why we do these things. Historically or traditionally, it didn't emanate from people, it emanated from God. And ultimately, that's where the authority lied. Now we say, no, authority lies with us. We, human beings, are ultimately responsible for our action. Rescue won't come outside of ourselves. No divine hand is going to save the world from itself or humanity from itself. And the liturgy is an expression of that, and all of a sudden, it moves it. It's as if, too, I think another example maybe to help folks. When I was growing up as a kid, I grew up at a conservative congregation, and we did traditional liturgy. A lot of time was invested in teaching kids how to say the words correctly.
Oh, definitely.
And then told, well, we don't really believe exactly like it said, but a lot of energy was invested in just practicing that.
We still spend a lot of energy in rabbinic school making sure that you can read each letter correctly. And it's true. If you hold up the letters and the words as incredibly important and authoritative, if that's what connects you to your people and that's what gives you religious meaning, then yeah, that does really matter. But if it's about the meaning of the words, then suddenly it's a whole different thing.
It changes the dynamic and the way we teach our kids. We don't spend hours and hours just practicing prayers. We don't need to. They read English. The kids practice getting up before their Barr bat mitzvah service. We want to make sure she or he can read the Torah portion correctly and read the service loudly and slowly and clearly.
But even what the Barr and bat mitzvah kids, what the Hebrew it is they read is radically different than anything I had seen anywhere else.
Right, because it's about empowerment. And what was so interesting, what was so fascinating to me is I forget sometime how once you change one element, it has a ripple effect.
Definitely.
You can't just change the liturgy without it doing more than that. Our liturgy was changed because of the issue of authority, and then learning how to read liturgy and the conversation about the reader being present and the listeners being engaged in a new way because they're interacting with it as well. One, because it's primarily in English, and two, because there is this give and take and back and forth that's occurring in the experience.
The liturgy demands more of us, and especially on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there is a lot of examine your life right now. And we're going to give you some categories to think about. Right. And instead of making an alphabetized from xenophobia to whatever the A word is, for some of other liberal congregations, there's a litany of different types of things, but you can passively listen to it in a different way. And I think that the truth is, if we claim our own authority, that also demands a different amount of engagement. Right.
And there is a relationship between language and authority.
Oh,
and the language that we speak, and I think sometimes people discount language, right? We were having, and the reason you're giggling, we were just talking about a sermon you're preparing for school. People oftentimes discount language. So what does it matter if we say chairman versus chairperson, right? Mm-hmm. People say, oh, it really doesn't matter. Women are being hypersensitive.
Mankind.
It can, and you should just accept that because it's okay. It doesn't discount you as a woman. I include you in my definition of man. That you don't see yourself as a man, that's your problem, not mine.
Obviously.
Right? Yeah. And I think this conversation about the use of language becomes really important because languages are the lens and the map through which we see the world, and the map which allows us to negotiate the world.
And it also determines the worlds that we continue to create on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So it's not just where we are in this moment, but it's where we're going to be tomorrow and the day after.
Right. And you think even about, we're in North America, the United States of America, all men are created equal. Even though they didn't really mean those words as they wrote them.
Well, we don't really know that. That's what we have all decided, that they don't really mean it.
Well, they didn't mean. Well, we knew that there was slavery, so they didn't.
You're saying. I thought you were talking about gender.
No, I'm not talking about gender. I'm talking about they didn't really believe all men were equal.
Yeah. Of course not, because then you wouldn't be able to own people.
Right. Exactly. But there were other folks who came afterwards and say, look, these words actually have meanings. If the word all means all, then some can't be enslaved. Yeah. All means all people are equal, and then they pushed that gender issue. But it really, it was interesting. They worked from the text, but before they worked from the text, they had this internal understanding of where authority lays, and it changes it. And I think that that's one of the experiences that certainly we have at Beth Adam and our Jewish community. And it was just so interesting watching it play out on this piece that we don't often think about. Oftentimes we think about it as being about just reading.
Yeah.
And when we were in this conversation with Iah, the conversation with my brother out in California, and began to move beyond just the technical skills, but the philosophy that underpins it and the religious component that underpins it, it really began to sort of change the dynamic and our understanding of what we're doing, and it really heightened for me why this institution is different. It's why, there are people who use, we're not the only people who stream. There are lots of places who stream, and I know people are jumping from place to place, but the technology isn't just technology. It's also how people embrace it. Is it a voyeuristic experience, or are you part of a community? Are you talking to one another, or are you supposed to sit passively back? Are you hearing words that are telling you what to believe, or are you participating in a service that allows for openness and personal responsibility?
And even more than that you can be validly religious and validly Jewish wherever you are. Literally wearing whatever you're wearing in your homes, at work, out and about, that it doesn't have to be behind a specific four walls with specific kinds of people. It's who we are when we choose to claim it and take it wherever we choose to take it.
Right, absolutely, and that's the beauty of what for me, what's so exciting is that we're able to do that and literally carry it with us. And now with this new format, you get to carry it in the pocket, and you can really watch streaming services so much more easily, because it is about who we are all the time, not just who we are from 6 to 6:30 if you're watching right now, or on whatever day Rosh Hashanah is going to fall next year, October 2nd or 3rd. We're Jewish all the time, and we have multiple identities and how we interact, but it's about what the value structure we carry, how we understand our rights and our responsibilities as free agents who get to make choices. So it was interesting having to work with language and work with presentation, and it drew out this subtext, which is really the core. The subtext really is the ground upon which all this works. So it was really exciting to have this moment to sort of think through it, to work with you, to work with my brother, and to talk about what services are supposed to be about and what the liturgy is supposed to be about.
Definitely.
So we want you to continue to participate in the liturgical experience, continue in the conversation, because each of us has the right and each of us has the responsibility to create the voice of the Jewish future. So we're going to continue with some other liturgy. This is turned around. If you want to continue with the Challah.
As the fingers of the Challah intertwine, so do we join hands in our common humanity, sharing the fruits of our labors. We cherish that which has been created through human effort, for it is through the work of our hands, the strength of human spirit, the vision of our minds, that our dreams are woven into the tapestry of time. We celebrate the accomplishments of yesterday and today, anticipating the possibilities of tomorrow. May the sharing of this Challah strengthen our bonds with others who walk upon this earth. Baruch Amal Kapeinu, blessed is the work of our hands. Baruch Hazon Ha'adam, blessed is the vision of our minds. Baruch Lechem Haaretz, blessed is the bread of the earth.
Right. And then if you have some wine or some juice, feel free to join me. We celebrate the fruit of the. Let me start that again. We celebrate. So presentation matters. If you go too fast, you will stumble. That's my. We celebrate the fruit of the vine and the bounty of nature as we lift the cup and sip from it. For we are part of nature, which gave us birth and continues to sustain us. Even as we depend upon nature, so do we influence its course. Through the search for understanding, we gain the knowledge to shape our world. Guided by the best of human wisdom, the compassion of our spirit, we accept the responsibility which rests upon us. May the taste of this wine or this juice upon our lips stir within us a reverence for nature and a respect for human endeavor. Bruchim ha'chayim ba'olam, blessed is the life within the world. Bruchim ha'chayim ba'adam, blessed is the life within each person. And so we say, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
To life.
To life.
A few announcements before we conclude. As I said, you continue chatting after the service stops streaming. You can always come back. It's a little bit different, too. you won't just see a loop anymore. The service actually stops. What that means is when you click on the big arrow, the play arrow, which you see in lots of places, everyone gets to begin at the beginning again, which is sort of nice versus jumping in wherever that loop is going. That's a little bit different format. So I encourage you to come back. It also means you can send people over and tell them, go to ourjewishcommunity.org, go to the streaming, and they can watch the whole service there as well, and they'll just start right from the beginning, but the comments remain. I encourage you to go to CincinnatiOJC.org. CincinnatiOJC.org. If you type that in, it'll take you to a page on our ourjewishcommunity.org website. And there you're going to find a link to Steen Metz, the materials that we created with him. Some of you remember, Harriet was with me last week. We talked about it. Steen was a 8-year-old child when the Nazis took over Denmark. He and his mother and his fathers were captured, taken to Theresienstadt. They were there for 18 months. His father died there of abuse and hard work and starvation. He and his mother returned to Denmark 18 months later. The Danes were treated a little bit differently than other Jews during the Holocaust. Steen talks about that. He talks about what it was to be a child. He talks about what he's learned as he's grown up, because while he lived the experience, he lived it as an 8-year-old, and he really had to learn about it, which is very interesting. So if you go to CincinnatiOJC.org and click on that, there's a short interview with Sarah Weiss, who's the director of the Holocaust Center, the Center for Holocaust and Humanities Studies, the Center for Holocaust and Humanities Education, in Cincinnati. She does an interview with Steen. There's also a service that Sarah and I did at the bottom of the page that you can watch. And if you want, there's a full presentation by Steen. So the interview is about 5-6 minutes. His full presentation is about an hour. You can always skip through it if you want. But it may be a conversation or presentation that you've not heard by somebody who was a child during the Holocaust and what his remembrances are. There are also some blogs posted by Harriet, who was here last week, who's a friend of Steen, and we had 2 of our high school students write their reflective pieces as well as Sarah Weiss, who's the director of the Center for Holocaust and Humanities Education here in Cincinnati. So take a look at that, learn, certainly share it with your friends. Our goal, obviously, is not just to create this material, but it's to create material that others can use, share, learn from, grow from, and you can always go visit Steen's his own page, which is listed at the bottom as well. Do that. Certainly keep on checking our Facebook page. We got lots going on, more activities, other folks joining us next week as we continue to have services. We'll announce who's going to be with me next week on Facebook. I hope you do that. Go to ourjewishcommunity.org and continue to share it. And maybe the holidays are coming. Hanukkah and Christmas are coming up.
They are.
Right? And if you go to Zazzle, you can type in ourjewishcommunity.org and you'll find our Hanukkah Christmas cards. You can order them. Maybe you can use them for your business and other cards as well. So we have lots.
And we'll have a resource guide very soon.
Oh, that's right. Are you working on that?
Yes, I am.
It's almost...
It will be there by the time a little before Hanukkah.
It's a resource guide for Hanukkah, just like many of you may have shared our resource guide for Rosh Hashanah, for parents with kids, and there was other things really for just adults to do.
And there'll be a section about helping navigate Christmas and Hanukkah for families that celebrate both, or are trying to pick and choose, or try and come up with different traditions that work for them.
We have so much going on. We're delighted you're here. We're delighted you're sharing this evening with us, this Shabbat. And we close with the words that we close with each week. May we know blessings those who are near, and may we know blessings those who are far. And may the Sabbath bring its goodness to everyone soon, wherever they are. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.